good afternoon. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. So today I'm going to be sharing some information with you, and then we'll definitely get into some discussion around what I call the Great Tsunami, which is actually not coming, it's already here, and we're going to talk more about that. Let me give you a little bit more information about myself. So I actually will be teaching an Aging Gracefully class. Aging Gracefully course on March 1st. It's going to be a 22-hour group ed class that starts on November 1st. So that's 22 hours. You're only going to get like half an hour here. And so if you're interested in that, it's part of the Social and Human Services Department. But in the real world, I also work for the King County Housing Authority. And we have 25, join us, you're welcome to me.
I'll be back first.
Okay. I am responsible for, we have a resident services coordination program at King County Housing Authority, and I am responsible for the monitoring and the operations of that program. And we have 25 senior buildings throughout King County. We call them mixed population buildings because they serve senior and younger disabled folks. And on those properties, we have our seniors, and we're going to get into the term seniors because they don't like to be called seniors. But for the purposes of our discussion today, I'm going to use the word seniors. And you'll hear me also say elderly and older adults. If you can coin a good word for this generation, you will become rich and famous and well-liked because none of the terms and labels that we currently use are favored by any of the baby boomers. So they're about 80% older adults and 20% younger disabled living together. And our buildings are on average 70-unit buildings, so 70 households live on these properties. And we've already seen the dynamics of younger people living with older folks. And we also have a large aging population. A lot of our residents, older residents, have been living in our properties for 15, 20, 25, 30 years. We even have a couple centenarians living on our properties. And our goal for our program is to help those individuals age in place. Because as you'll see, as I get into the discussion, baby boomers want to stay home when they get sick. They want to age in place in their own homes, in their own communities. They don't want to be displaced into nursing homes or long-term care facilities. And most of the residents that we work with are low or fixed income, so they don't even, assisted living is not even something they can imagine because they can't afford it. So that's what I do. So my staff are service coordinators, and which is a quasi word for social worker, but because it's HUD funded, we can't use the term social worker, and some of them don't have social work degrees, so we call them service coordinators, but they actually do the same thing. They actually link residents to the community, to services in the community that allow them to age in place. And we also do a lot of eviction prevention, so they don't get evicted. We don't evict older folks, and we don't evict younger folks in our communities, which is why we have a large waiting list and why it takes so long to get into housing. Because basically, our eviction rate is less than 1%. So basically, we have to wait for folks to die in housing in order to move the wait list. So, and we also have family housing and Section 8 program. But I work in the older adults population housing. So that's what I do. I've been in the field for over 25 years. I was also in the chemical dependency field. I'm a CDP. I have a master's degree from Seattle University in nonprofit leadership. And I also went to the UW Geriatric Mental Health Specialist Certification Program. So that's my background. For fun, I also worked as a contract 8-hour employee for ABHOW, which is American Baptist Homes to the West, and they have a senior-only property in Linwood, and I actually do that on Saturdays. So I do the management at the Housing Authority, and then I have fun with the residents at ABHOW on Saturdays. So they keep me young. So I like that because it keeps I have a foot in each of those worlds, the management world as well as the direct service world. And I actually do service coordination at ABHOW on Saturdays. So it keeps me fresh, and I learn a lot about the Snohomish County resources because I know a lot, and I'm very familiar with King County, but working in Linwood, I've also now been exposed to the services at Snohomish County. So that's my background. So you probably have heard this, and it's probably not the first time, but The older population is projected to double from 35 million in 2000 to 71.5 million by 2030. So that's why we're here, and that's why I'm saying the actual tsunami is already here. It's not coming because we already have, as of January 1st of last year, 2011, there's 10,000 folks in this country that turn 65 every single day. And those are the baby boomers. Those are the folks born between 1946 and 1964. So the folks born in 1946 started turning 65 in 2011. So how many in the room were born between 46 and 64? Right, so these are your baby boomers. How many were born 65 to 87? Generation X. And
They don't usually put me in generation that's thinking too far down the line.
yeah, I'm at the end of the baby boomer, so I have a lot of baby boomer traits, but I also have some Generation X traits. So some of us are in the middle. And then, of course, we have the millennials, right? How many millennials in the room? Right. So I do another class on effective communication between the 4 generations. The other one is the silent generation. Silent generation was prior to 1946, right? Anyone here prior to 1946? So we have the 3 generations here in the room at this moment. So, so the baby boomers, 78 million babies were born during the boom period. 78 million, the largest population growth ever in this country. And as I said, we're starting to turn 65 as of 2011.
Susan, what are the dates again for baby boomers?
Baby boomers 46 is on the slide here.
Oh, it is.
It'll be coming up here. And I thought I brought a handout on the baby boomers, but yeah, 1946 to 64. Yes, anyone else needs handout? There were 3. Yeah, I gave you the one on baby boomer time. You have this?
Oh.
Yeah, that has one.
Thank you.
I love this slide. And here you see, by 2050, the projection is 96 million. So by 2030, 1 in 4 American adults in this, 1 in 4 people in this country will be 65 or older, and that goes to 1 in 3 by 2050. A big shift there. So this is what baby boomers look like, the ones that raised their hands in the room, and these are some of the famous people that kind of we grew up with, baby boomers grew up with, and kind of defined the generation. Another way that I call the generation is the generation of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Okay, we are the generation of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And what I talk about is that just because we're getting older, it doesn't mean we stop the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And that's why we're going to be in trouble. Because people the baby boomer generation are going to engage and continue to be active and continue to engage in sex, in drugs, and all those other issues as they age. They're not going to stop once they're 65. They're going to continue. And of course, pharmaceuticals and a lot of other things are contributing to the continuation of those behaviors. But so that's us. Cher's going to be in town, I heard. She got the concert, so she's still performing. Yeah.
She still looks like that.
Yeah.
I mean, she looked like that when I saw her back about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And she looked like that when my mom was.
Well, you know, I often ask, does anyone know what the #1 surgery is for baby boomers? And it's not Botox, which is what keeps them looking like that, by the way. But what is the #1 surgery for baby boomers?
Cheek lifting, cheek implant.
Remember, they want to stay active. So what are baby boomers doing to their bodies?
Yeah, knee
Surgery and
knees.
knee replacements. #1 surgery for baby boomers because they don't want to stop skiing, they don't want to stop riding their bikes and doing. So yeah, I wish I had put money into the knee replacement companies. Dupri, I think, is the big one. It's probably not too late, yes. So hey, if you want to stop that price, that would be one there. So I call it the impending revolution. Why? Because, and like I said, it's already here. But baby boomers will trigger major changes and have major impacts throughout our society, which is what we're going to be talking about. What are those impacts? I mentioned that already. Oh, and the life expectancy is also increased to 83 for the baby boomer generation. So they're going to be living longer. 70 is the new 65. When you speak to an older person who's 70, and you say 70 is the new 65, they say no, 70 is 70. But in our minds, in a lot of the baby boomers' minds, and you'll see a cartoon I'm going to share with you later, when we look in the mirror, we don't see 65 and we don't see 70, even though that is our chronological age. This just gives you a breakdown of where baby boomers live. And this is a snapshot. It'll change over time, but most 37% in the suburbs, 24% in the cities. We're seeing a change here in Seattle where more baby boomers are moving into downtown, are moving into the urban communities. They want to get rid of their cars. They want to be next to mass transit. They want to be able to walk to places. So we are seeing shifts already from the suburbs back into cities and urban areas. But 40% in small towns or even rural areas. And we're going to see a shift in that. About 78% own a home. 25% live alone, so 1 in 4 live alone. Okay, don't have a spouse or maybe widowed. And that's important to know too. Some of the facts for this generation, they tend to be very independent, self-reliant. They grew up in a time of change. They like to challenge the status quo. They're going to be very difficult to work with. They're going to be very demanding because they know the entitlements. They know all the entitlements that are out there, and they're going to want each and every one of these entitlements. And they're going to know how to jump through the hoops and do the paperwork, and they feel like they've earned it. They worked for a long time, and now when they're ready to retire, they want everything that's coming to them, and they believe, you know, even if they don't need it, but if they're entitled to it, they want it. And so it's going to be interesting. So, you know, when we talk about Affordable Care Act and we talk about Medicare and Social Security, all these things are going to be impacted by the baby boomers. Voting, if you think about, you know, once we get to the point where we make up 25% of the voting block, or even 1/3 of the voting block, things are going to even shift politically. Because baby boomers are not going to stand for government shutdown. They're not going to stand for the cuts in Medicare and Social Security that are expected, that are needed, by the way, but we're really going to push for something to change there. We're also expected to live longer. Living longer doesn't mean that we're going to have higher quality of life. It just means we're going to live longer. Because the other thing we know with the baby boom generation is, unfortunately, again, because of the sex spectrum on the row, a lot of the medical issues are going to follow. Diabetes, right? Was it yesterday that Tom Hanks came out and disclosed that he's diabetic? And Tom Hanks is a baby boomer. We're going to see more and more talks about the chronic health conditions that also are associated with baby boomers. Does anyone know what the baby boomer disease is? And you know, it's really sad, but I was at the conference in May, and they're calling it the baby boomer disease, Alzheimer's. Okay, so Alzheimer's is just like knee replacement. Alzheimer's is the number one disease. If you go to the Alzheimer's website, Alzheimer's on their website, and they even have a couple of articles on that. Well, it's not that Alzheimer's is going to increase; it's just that there's more of us, so it's going to be more prevalent, and so we're going to see more of it. So again, just because we're going to live longer doesn't mean the quality of life is going to be better. But those of us that could be, will remain active, physically active. Also, we're accustomed to technology, right? They want to be wired. Even my folks at our public housing facilities, they want wireless internet. They don't understand why the housing authority cannot provide wireless internet.
My grandmother chews me out all the time because her wireless internet doesn't work. She's North Dakota.
Yeah. Even my property at Apple that I work on, about half of and that's a 40-unit development, around about half of my residents in that development have smartphones, have computers. We have a couple computers in the community room that are common computers, and there's always someone at those computers. And these are the silent generation folks, which is really interesting. But yeah, we're going to demand to be, and we will, I think, eventually at some point, wireless will be like regular TV is today at some point in the future. We'll all have access to wireless. And so we don't have wireless at our properties, those 25 buildings I was talking about. So but there are community establishments that they can go to and get wireless. Or some of them choose to pay for wireless, which is very, very expensive. So they make choices. Am I going to pay for medication? Am I going to pay for wireless? Am I going to pay my rent? So they're also going to need more in-home care services, and so home health care aides are going to increase. That is a field that we know. Anything related to health, there is going to be job security. But one of the areas that we know is going to have an explosion is on the home health care industry, which also then, because of the baby boom generation, changes will have to happen in that arena. Because as you know right now, I do a lot of the classes for SEIU, representative home health care workers. I'm with the Home Community College, and I teach several of the classes for them. Very diverse population, home health care aides, and very low pay. And we know that it's going to have to be a shift because baby boomers are going to demand quality people coming into their homes providing home health care aides. So we're going to have to start thinking about what changes even in that field need to be made to accommodate the baby boomers that are going to be very demanding about who's coming into my home to take care of me when I need. So that's going to be another thing to consider. We're also, and we see this already, a lot of baby boomers currently take care of either adult children or their own parents. And we call those echo boomers, right? Those that were close. My mother was only 18 years older than I am. She had me when she was 18. She passed away a couple of years ago, and my sister took care of her. But we're going to see that a lot in the baby boom generation. And she chose to die at home. She had hospice at home. And a lot of us baby boomers are in those same situations where we're either taking care of elderly parents or older siblings or even older adults, older children. So that's something else. So what are some of the attitudes widely associated with privilege? Because many of us grew up in the times of backwards, right? We were part of the good old days. We were part of when, prior to this economic downpour, we grew, things were good. If you remember back then, the economy was good, everything was great. One of the healthiest, wealthiest, and highly educated generation, about 98% of baby boomers have a high school diploma. About 50% have some kind of post-high school degree. So very educated, very, and we made good money, and some of us made good choices in investments. The other thing we also know is that baby boomers are probably going to outlive the retirement. So, unless you're very, very wealthy and you have a lot of money, most baby boomers, on average, have anywhere from 10 to 20 years of retirement income from the time they turn 65. But they're going to outlive that, we know. So they're going to need public housing, they're going to need Section 8, they're going to need Medicaid and Medicare and all those programs that currently are being threatened to be cut and taken away. So, social justice, right? We talked about Occupy, right? That is the generation. AIDS, if you think of the AIDS activism in the 1980s, if you think about, all that was started and pushed by the baby boomers. The millennials, however, are pushing the new trends in social activism. Like don't ask, don't tell, gay marriage. Those things are being spearheaded by the millennials. And a lot of those things are passing because of the millennials, because they grew up with gay folks, and they served in the military, and they don't understand what the big deal is. The baby boomers also had something to do with it, but it's the millennials that are pushing that agenda, which is really wonderful. So they did get that from the baby boomers. They did get the advocacy of social justice and purpose, and they want to be involved in charities. And they don't only want to give money, but they want to give money and be part of how that money is distributed and what's done with that money. They want to be active participants with the charities, not just give money like we used to do with United Way. They actually want to tell United Way what to do with their money and not leave it up to United Way. We tend to think of ourselves as a special generation. Body language is very important. There's a whole, millennials like to communicate by texting, right? The early baby boomers like personal interaction, Telephone is okay, but we actually like to chat and have physical and face-to-face time. A little different with millennials, and I had to learn that because I have some staff that I supervise that are millennials that would not, that I never heard from. Or if I made appointments to meet with them, things always came up. So I learned that their form, or their preferred form of communication was texting and email. So that's how I, communicate with them, unless I absolutely need to have a face-to-face. And now we work really happy together because we both appreciate and respect each other's styles around communication. But we do know that that is the preference for the millennials is email or texting. Even if we're right next door, I have a staff person that I work with. She's not a subordinate, but she works right next door. And sometimes I need to interact with her and get information. And I'll stop by her office, which is right next to my office, and she'll say, "Send me an email." I'm like, "Can we just talk right now?" She goes, "I'm busy, send me an email." And actually then I learn I get a quicker response if I email her, so it's easier just to email. So you gotta learn these things about the different generations so you don't get frustrated when you're working with them or dealing with them. And you understand why they behave the way they do and you don't take it personal or think that there's something going on. Because a lot of the times it's just, I have which I thought I had, but I have a chart that's about 20 pages of all the generations and then have all the different characteristics, work ethics, values, all those things, and it really does a wonderful job. And I'll be having this at the class, or you can email me. I'll be happy to email it to you. It tells you the differences of the 4 generations in all those different characteristics, which is really, and they did a really good job putting that together. And I know, some of the stuff are generalizations. So you can't say every millennial is this way, every baby boomer is this way, because it doesn't work that way. But there's a bell curve, and most people fall in the middle when we talk about the different generations. So this is what we're going to discuss. And I gave you some handouts. It's really, having a conversation about what are, and I've already hinted about some of these, but discussing and identifying the possible impacts, challenges, changes, and opportunities that are going to be created by this impending baby boom generation. Just based on what I've already shared with you about the baby boom generation, what do you think are some things that we're going to need to think about? So what systems will be impacted and the challenges that come with that, and what changes do you see maybe need to be made to those systems to accommodate this baby boom generation that's coming?
Well, the kind of thinking that's currently going on in a large segment of our government representatives has got to change, because they think that the social programs that were started by people like Roosevelt are so socialistic, and we're going to need more social programs.
But what it makes me, if older people are the fastest aging demographic, or the fastest growing demographic, and then they turn out to vote in higher numbers normally than younger folks, I just wonder about like a conservative shift in politics and how that might affect us. And I don't know if we'll see a change in the socialist or that perception of those programs as socialist. I feel like that ideology gets taken even further with some of these folks. Because I know that baby boomers on whole are a little more conservative than younger folks.
So early baby boomers
Right.
fall in that category. So I always say we have to wait for a segment of the society to die off. Right? The silent generation are dying off. Unfortunately, they're there. But that you're right. You bring up a good point. The early baby boomers, 1946 to maybe 51, 52, are also very conservative, and we know that. So
I'll just go ahead and say
Yeah,
why.
I would take issue with that.
But
because
not, again,
those were the people who were in the 60s who were demonstrating at the universities. So what you're saying, the demographic is mostly.
because as we get older, we become more conservative.
Well, I realize people have
We find
changed,
religion.
but
There are many.
I still don't.
Well, and like our perception of conservative has changed. as
Oh,
well,
yeah.
that's-
Yeah, it also depends
that
on
shifted
what you
as
mean.
well, so almost, yeah.
We're talking about economically and social policy conservative.
Oh, okay.
As we get older, right? But we're also going to be demanding. right? So we can't have it both ways. We can't say, I need more, I want my entitlements, I want more social services, but we're gonna cut government, because who's gonna fund the programs? Are nonprofit agencies gonna step up to the plate, or NGOs? Who's gonna provide these services? You know, think about the example of yesterday when the threat of not paying the military families for funerals, right? Who stepped in? A nonprofit agency. So is that the expectation, that when government shuts down, then we look to nonprofit agencies and charities to then provide the services that government used to fund? And my fear is that when that happens, when these nonprofit agencies step up to the plate, then people will say, oh, see, government doesn't need to be in that business because.
But isn't it a temporary loan?
It's a temporary loan? Is that how
Yeah,
it's set up?
I think they're going to be reimbursed.
By the government,
By the
when they
government
open up?
opens up.
With interest probably.
Yeah.
Probably gonna have to pay interest on that.
Yeah.
Whereas if we just gave them the money,
I'm just wondering too, being in an older category with the kind of issues that will be happening, you know, your health, you're more vulnerable, financially, physically, and all those things. I'm wondering if your perceptions at a time will shift because of the vulnerability. You may say, well, social programs are necessary. I mean, it's one thing to have those kind of ideas and values when you're self-sufficient, but as you age, you become more vulnerable. So I'm wondering, you may look at that from a different perspective as the fear of social kinds of things. It may need to become, coming from a different, you know, the perspectives around this thing may need to shift.
yeah, and you also brought another point that I want to emphasize. The other thing is when we look at the people that are being conservative around social programs and economics and all that, these are the folks that have the resources, that they live in a different, you know, like Bill Moore across the bubble, right? They live in a bubble. They're talking about cutting programs, but it's because they don't need to participate because they have the resources to pay for those services. They're looking at, you know, they're saying we can cut these programs without seeing the impact that it has on the, you know, on low income, fixed income individuals. So as that shifts, as more and more people come into the system that fit low income, fixed income, we're gonna see a change. Because not all baby boomers are gonna be affluent. Not all baby, like I said, at some point, even those conservative baby boomers are gonna outspend their money, their retirement, and are gonna need social services. And that's when the shift will happen.
Just,
Sure.
just back to the idea that people, that generation's getting more conservative. What I've read, and it's been a while, so I might be off, is that more so idea that whatever you are, as you age, you become more so. So if you're a little bit religious, you become, but you become more religious. If you're a little conservative, you become more conservative. And that to me seems different. Tell me if what you know about this is different from people who were more liberal becoming more conservative.
Right, that is.
So it's a matter of maybe of degree. Does that seem
I
accurate?
think that's accurate, yeah. We don't see major shifts of people that were liberal now all of a sudden getting older and becoming a conservative. We don't see that. But people's ideas do shift.
I can see it in myself.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, somebody who's more liberal over time becoming more conservative.
And you're a millennial.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if maybe I'm missing something in the equation because we have all these broad ideas of how generations act. I'm wondering if there's something I'm missing that can answer the critical question, and that is, what is happening now?
But generations are made up of many individuals, and anytime you pinpoint one, you go into one data point, one individual, you're going to see a completely unique individual.
Well, you bring your perspective and your lens to the conversation, and you bring your, you know, so not all you don't represent all millennials, just like I don't represent all baby boomers. And with it, there's going to be anomalies among the generations. There's going to be people that are not going to, even people who were born during that period may not have any of the traits related to you know, the characteristics of that generation. They may be completely out. But you were born in that generation, so we're calling you a millennial. Doesn't mean you have to act like a millennial or prescribe to all the characteristics related to a millennial. And we know that within every generation, there are always people that are not going to even meet the criteria for what we label that generation.
That's-
But I'll
labels
sit
are
there.
all one thing or another, and that's great and dandy. The biggest problem we have now is the problem that we have now. And that is, we have many of us who came from activist and liberal backgrounds, and for some reason, we're not being represented in these higher forms of government, which have pretty much completely given out on us. Where
And
is
why?
the disconnect?
Money, power, right? I mean, money, power, and at some point that is gonna shift, you know? I mean, think about what's happening in government right now. Think about senators and Congress folks, right? Think about lobbyists. Think about who is financially pushing that system. It's people with money. It's corporations, right? Have you seen a sign of folks on I-5? I live in Shoreline. Corporations are not people.
Right.
But we're stuck right now. We're stuck right now. Corporations are people because the Supreme Court said they are. And corporations have what? And corporations influence who? And our Congress and senators. And until there's a shift in that, that's the why. That's one of the big pieces as to the why.
Money is the root of all evil.
I don't think it's a cliche. Not that I don't like money, but I'm just saying.
I just had a question. I wondered if in your research you have seen what percentage of baby boomers have a retirement plan?
Actually, yes. There we go. So right now, currently, right, it takes 2.1 workers to financially provide, to work in order for someone to get Social Security. And that we're going to see that even get bigger, right? It used to be one-on-one, right? It used to be we had enough people working, young people working, to then support older folks as we were retiring and we were getting our Social Security. Now it takes 2 young people to work for every person collecting Social Security. That's what that means. And it's just going to get worse and worse. Because there's going to be many more of us. We need a lot of young people. And what's happening in this economic crisis right now?
Jobs too.
What's happening with the young population? They're not working. They can't find jobs. So how? Who's going to pay?
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we
Right.
heard in
Baby
library
boomers.
school. Oh, there are going to be all these jobs because all the older librarians are going to retire. Well, they're not.
Right.
No, honestly, because they're
You
saying,
know what? Because
where
we
am I going to
can't.
get health care? How am I going to have money for my
Yeah.
whole life? And that's what I see is that more and more unemployment with younger people because people
And you are
retire a
correct.
lot later.
And one of the things that we're seeing is that baby boomers, some of us will never retire. Some of us I have 2 jobs. A lot of us have multiple jobs. The other thing is the average retirement age for baby boomers moved from 65 closer to 70 now. Also, because the government keeps changing when you can collect. So I can't collect now until I'm 67 if I want full retirement. I think that's going to change by the time I turn 65 in 19 years. It might be 80. So it's not that we don't want to retire. We can't afford to retire. I have folks that work at the housing authority that have been in the housing authority 20, 25, 30, 35 years. For the first time this year, we had a 35-year category. And the reason they don't retire is because they're not 65. And they can't afford to retire because they can't afford to pay premiums on their health care for them or their families and spouses if they retire. So they're staying on the housing authority till they turn 65 so then they could collect Medicare. And they can't afford health care, so that's why they stay on. And they started when they were 20, 21, 22. And they've been with us all these years. So that's one of the reasons. Again, only 36% think that they'll have enough money to live comfortably. I started preparing for retirement 10 years ago. Started putting money into my deferred, I'm part of the PERS program, the state program. So, and they force you to do it, so thank God, because I don't think I would have done it on my own if they don't just automatically take it out. But I have a 401k, and, because finally I say, oh my God, who's going to take care of me, And even though I started 10 years ago, I don't think I'll have enough if I live longer than 75, 80 to have enough money to continue living to the style that I've become accustomed to.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, just keep on going.
That's right. So only 47% think that they have enough. 40% are not sure if they have enough. And 25% do not think. So 25%, I think it's actually higher than 25%. Don't even think they will ever be able to have enough to retire. Okay. And then when you look at males compared to females, 34% of females, 1 in 3 compared to half males. So and what do we want? We want to live in our homes. We also want, we don't want to live in an old folks' home. We don't want to live in senior housing. We want intergenerational housing. We want sidewalks. We want green. We want to be close to our families, our grandkids. We want a room so when our grandkids come to visit, they can stay with us. We get requests like that at the housing authority. Can I have an additional bedroom for my grandkid? No, you can't. They have to live there full time. We can't just give you an extra bedroom because we have grandkids that want to visit every other weekend. They're homeless people that need housing. We're not just going to give you an additional bedroom for that. So they want to stay engaged socially, politically, up for semi-retirement. So even me, in thinking about 19 years from now when I'm 65, yeah, I'll probably retire. I hope to retire from the housing authority, but I'll still do something on the side. I'll still do some part-time work. I'll do something to keep myself active. One of the reasons for that too is we've had this happen at the housing authority already 3 times in the last 2 years. Folks that have retired at 65 after being at the housing authority for a long time, they retired at 65 and they died within 2 years. So there's also that fear of if I retire and I don't do anything, you know, and my life has been working, and you know, I always talk about that's our identity, right? Our legacy is what we do for a living, what we've done to make a difference in this world. When that gets taken away or we stop doing that, what happens to us?
My grandfather last year lived on a very big property, had a full garage. He rebuilt tractors and all kinds of things, and they moved him out. They sold everything that he had, moved him to be close to family in Arizona from Iowa, and he got this really nice brand new trailer. It was like a 30-foot little trailer that he could pull. He was so depressed. I mean, it was so traumatic, and he felt like he had nothing. And even though it's like he was his family, it was like his whole life was gone. And he's 81. I mean, he mowed lawns. He did everything. So I mean, it was amazing what he did with that activity, and that kept him bright. And he just recently decided that to just buying a home, even though it was in the trailer park, having a mobile home identified him within the community as more like a permanent resident, allowed him to make connections in the neighborhood that just wasn't, from the trailer. So just that alone made him feel like so much happier. I mean, and so it was like amazing to see how you take all those things away. And I mean, if we're gonna live longer, then people are gonna want to be, and you're more vital, you're more healthy for a longer period of time. Then wouldn't you not want to retire because you're gonna stay active? And the minute I think you start diminishing those things in your life, it affects everything from your physical, your mental.
Well, when you think about aging and all the losses associated with aging, right? Because it is like Kubler-Ross. We do go through those stages of loss as we get older.
Right.
The good intentions are, we'll take him out so he can be closer to us and we can monitor him, because it's more convenient to have him here than have him in Iowa.
Right, he hurts and stuff like that.
Right. But we don't understand the psychological, emotional change that occurs in that individual when we take them out of their sense of security, safety, and community and transplant them somewhere else because we think it's better for them. Especially if we don't have a conversation with that individual about whether or not that's what they want that. A lot of times we make the decisions for them, and we don't even, we say, this is what's going to happen, this is what we're going to do. And it's mostly for our convenience, not for the convenience of the person. And it is out of care and, good intentions, but there's some negative. I gave you these handouts already, but look at these cartoons. I think these are perfect. I always got whatever I wanted. The universe bent itself to my whims. My taste determined the styles, the colors, the music, the movies, even the food. Cars, televisions, houses, clothing, the entire consumer economy was tailored to my specifications. Now suddenly I'm middle-aged, unemployed, and my money is gone. This can't be happening to me. I'm a baby boomer. Right? Inside every baby boomer is a young person wondering, what happened? This is my favorite. This is me. This is me. This is what I see. It's true. For the first time in my life, looked in the mirror this year. I think it was March of this year. It was the first time in my life when I looked in the mirror in March and said, oh my God, who is that? Staring back at me. I did not see this until this year. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw Ruben in his 30s or even younger. And then this year, it hit me, and finally hit me, like, oh my God, no, I'm not Ruben from the 30s anymore. And Ruben can do a lot of the same things he used to be able to do. Body's changing, everything's changing, and I just turned 49. So.
At what point do you stop seeing yourself, for who you are and start seeing someone before that? At what age? You say 30s, and would you see the mid-30s?
I think it's different for everybody. Because I have friends and people I work with that are my age that haven't gotten there yet, that still see the 30s.
Okay.
But for some reason I got there before they did. And I tell them about it. One day you're going to look in the mirror, you're going to see the 52-year-old person looking back at you, not the 32-year-old person. Some people will never, ever accept this when they look in the mirror, and they'll be able to see past it. It's almost like the, mirror on the wall.
Right.
It's like the magic mirror. You look in the mirror and, when, another way of thinking about that is when I talk about chemical dependency, think about people on crystal meth who look into the mirror. They don't see the anorexia. They see health and you look at them and they're not healthy, but they see health. It's the same kind of masquerade. I call it psychological masquerade when you look in the mirror and your perception's weird.
This one's a little more constructive than that.
Baby boom will caught up in the aging process, right? But if we don't do something, we're going to see more of this. I already see it, we already see it throughout Seattle, right? Look at all the people living on I-5, all the panhandlers right at the ramps. In Shoreline, we have one on each side now, on 75th. And it's baby boomers who either were veterans or don't qualify for services or for whatever reasons, and we're out there. I'm not going to read these, you have these, but these are some of the 10 best practices that are put out there around the baby boom generation and what services and service providers need to start thinking about in terms of providing services. And then I talked about home health care, and I gave you an article on that. And why American communities are not ready to serve this population. So you have that. But we still have 15 minutes, so any other thoughts, questions, comments?
One thought that came to mind is I think that you think about you're getting the statistics for how many baby boomers, where they have enough for retirement and all that kind of stuff. I was thinking about the transfer of wealth from the baby boomers' parents' generation, the silent generation, to the baby boomers, and then what the difference is in the transfer of wealth from the baby boomers to the next generation, and how different that looks, and how different, I think that's different perspective that's given the baby boomers on their entitlements. When I think about it, it makes my head hurt, but.
And a lot of baby boomers didn't feel like they had to save because government would be there for them when they retired, right? Social
And their
programs.
parents, many of them, saved and saved and saved, and
To
were
give.
very frugally and gave to them.
And we see the millennials, they spend as they earn. They're not even thinking. That's retirement, getting old is not something that's even entered their.
What about the Xers?
The Xers, they kind of caught in the middle. We call them echo boomers. They kind of, because some of them saw Ronald Reagan years, so some of them are frugal, but then others are not. Others do spend as they earn also.
Generation X is the last generation that will get wealth from family
Right.
and parents who were middle class, who were able to save. So I'll get some money from my mom, even though she was a single mom, but she was just good at saving, and I don't see ending my life with any
That's exactly what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, that it's
Yeah.
diminishing. I mean, as you look at it as a, these broad statistics rather than individuals, but it's diminishing, and then.
else get nothing.
And they know, and they understand that when their parents go or move on, there's not going to be anything left because it's all going to be used up, or they're going to need to use that money to care for their parents. So it's not like you're going to inherit this money that now you're going to be able to use to benefit you.
how people pay for education. I mean, the cost of education was so much lower, and parents were probably more able to pay for it than they are.
Right, and we're able to help contribute.
Right.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. For all the baby boomers, Generation X, and even millennials, they start out negatively already because they start out with all these incredible student loans. And depending what field you go into, you can amass, if, I'm still paying student loans at 49. And I'm probably gonna die before I pay off my student loans because there were so many. And I deferred them, I pay my monthly payment, I'm currently paying now, but yeah, I don't see myself paying them off before I die.
I was thinking about the first comment you showed with the person saying, the world needs to be my oyster, and kind of the consumer culture around these
Oh, yeah.
things. That it's interesting. I live in Ballard, and this store opened kind of recently in my neighborhood called Beverly Daughter, and it's all things for older people to age at home, like a sling that will lower you into the bathtub, and so there's this new consumer culture around, around taking care of baby boomers. That's just fascinating to me.
There's a couple books here that talk precisely of marketing to leading edge baby boomers. There is a market. A lot of companies are getting savvy and they're knowing how to market to baby boomers. And they know this information. So they're saying, okay, so what products can we create? What products can we invent to get into that niche? Because we know baby boomers want to age in place. They want to stay at home. Reverse mortgage, another big thing, right, for a lot of folks, where you can get money because they know that we're going to outlive our retirement. So they're offering us reverse mortgages where you actually sell your house to the company that's going to give you the equity in the house so that you can use that equity to live longer. But what happens if you do a reverse mortgage and you outlive the reverse mortgage? You lost your house.
Housing authority.
Right, right. So all these products and all these ideas have come out of folks thinking about baby boomer and what, the future, and they're creating all of these products and all these programs to entice us, Think about, all the assisted living facilities that have popped up even in the Puget Sound area, and they're increasing ages, there's a lot of, and yeah, some folks will be able to afford those, but a large segment of the population will not be able to. A lot of us will be able to live at shag because shag is flat rents, right? So let's say they charge you $900 for one bedroom. You'll be able to do that for a period of time, but as you live longer and your income becomes less and less or even more fixed, then you're going to need the King County Housing Authority, or you're going to need public housing, and you need the Section 8 voucher. And we work very closely with SHAG. People from SHAG come to Housing Authority, and sometimes Housing Authority folks go back to SHAG, and it just becomes this revolving door.
What do you mean by flat rent?
There's a flat, as a Housing Authority, you can't pay more than 30% of your income toward rent. A place like SHAG, they have a flat rent. Everyone pays the same, regardless of your income. So, for instance, what's happening in the real world is that most people pay 50% or more of their income toward rent. And you're considered at risk of becoming homeless when you're in that category. You're very high risk. If you think about what you pay for rent based on your income, and most people fall in 50% or higher. So you're at risk because if you're paying more than 50% of your income just toward rent, then at some point, and rents keep going up. So some people pay 60%, 70% because they want to live in a certain neighborhood, they want to live in a certain community, so they're willing to pay. So they'll move into that neighborhood and maybe they won't drink any more lattes at Starbucks or eat cheaper foods to live in that community. So So SHAG, is different in that if you can afford to pay the rent, you can move in, but that's your rent and it has nothing to do, it's not tied into your income. And at some point, you won't be able, what we see is a lot of people, after they're there for a while, if their income doesn't increase and their rent continues to increase, then they can't afford it anymore. But it's not assisted living, it's just affordable housing. So we have, we have public housing, affordable housing, we have nursing homes, assisted living. So there's a whole continuum, and some of us will go through the whole continuum. But even though most of us want to stay at home, and that's why these companies are coming out and creating products to allow us to stay at home. So I hope I didn't depress you. And like I said, this is just touching the surface. There's all these wonderful books in your library here. Think about your parents if you're still around. Think about your baby boomer, and you have older adults, kids. These are all things that are going to impact us. We need to get active in the political system. We need to really make sure that our voices are being heard and mobilizing and getting, we need to mobilize and we need to have a message, cohesive message, and really push for change. And that's
what you guys already have, and this is your message. I'm a little
yeah. It's numbers. We need more numbers. We need, we need to be out on the streets. We need to go back to the 80s, right? Go back to the activism that happened. We need to go back to, look at what happens in other countries, right? Look at what happened just in Argentina. Look at Italy, look at Spain. Those people went to the streets.
It doesn't concern only, older folks. It concerns young people as well. So, we should all.
It's going to impact you,
right?
Yeah, but it's going to hit your bottom line, and it's going to hit you economically. So it makes sense for us to all work together, all the generations to come together and try to figure this out and unite and really, educate people around voting and who they're voting for. And I have a son, he's 26, and I have friends now that have kids in school. There's no civics class in school. They're not learning about government. They're not learning about voting. They're not learning about all those things that we learned about. If you ask them what are the state capitals, they couldn't give you the answer. They couldn't tell you what's the difference between the executive branch and the judicial branch. They don't get that in school anymore. So it's up to us to educate people around how government is set up, how democracy and all those things work. A lot of folks have no idea how government works.
That's scary in a
It
democracy.
is scary.
I think the scarier part is that maybe we don't have the time to do it anymore. I would love to be on the street with OWS as it was happening. I had other things to do. I had to
Priorities.
I had to make the money so that I could save.
Right, exactly. Priorities. I always say when we get to do it when it hurts. When we get to the point where it hurts and we can't stand it anymore, then we do something.
Right.
I think that's true. That's what he's all active. So Ruben, I wanted to thank you for coming today and sharing your knowledge with us and talking with us. And Katie or Kelly, can you tell me what next week's topic is?
Yes.
Oh, you did. Kelly's going to tell you we'll be here every week through the quarter.
It's great that you guys are
Yeah,
doing this.
Thursdays at noon. Please tell your friends. Tell your teachers, especially about topics that you think are relevant to your class. Sometimes they give extra credit or assignments related to attending one of these. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, do you have more of these flyers that maybe I can put up in my social studies class?
Yes, we can make you some,
That'd be
yes.
great, yeah.
So next week's topic is fast food industry fighting for fair wages for the better future of our families. It's going to be facilitated by a student at our college who's been a leader in the community in raising awareness about the fast food unfairness of wages problem.
But and you referred to debates, the majority of debates yesterday, that came up as a topic about how manufacturing jobs have really gone away and service jobs are the jobs of the future, and we can continue to pay $7 to $5. And we are going to have to increase the minimum wage and even the $15, $16, $17 service jobs, because those are the only jobs available, and people need to be able to live.
Directly relates to all the stuff we've
Yeah.
been talking about.
Sure
I was gonna say, perhaps you should come in
Savor us,
and join us next week.
I'll see if I have time.
Exactly.
And I'm happy to come back any other time to talk about this again or whatever.
Would be
That was
great.
very good, thank you.
Thank you, guys. If you want any of these stuff, any of these things electronically, I'm happy to send them to you.
Ruben, did you ever tell them you work with programs?
Yeah, we could probably.